Hello and welcome to the impzonepod podcast. We're back again to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans. And today, I want to talk about developing a narrative, a story. So, when you pitch an idea, take any idea, we'll take some of the ideas that we've kind of got going on now in TNA because it's easy to sort of work with. You're initially talking about like the same 5 or 6, 7 or 8 classic stories that kind of go on. There's only so many real narratives to sort of tell. When you're weaving a narrative, you're really like setting out where this story is starting, where like we are at, where you're going to reveal a certain thing, or whether you're not going to reveal that certain thing at this point, or whether it makes more sense to reveal it or to do something else at another point down the line in the story, and why it's more important to tell that part of the story at that particular point of that story versus earlier or versus later, etc., is like a real big process. But like the narratives themselves are quite simple. Like overall, you have a very simple narrative, like most of the time. Joe Hendry's rise to the championship, Mike Santana's rise to the championship, Josh Alexander's rise to the championship. All these people, you can talk about a million different people's rise to the championship, finally becoming the person. Even Kazarian finally becoming the guy after 20 long years of, plugging along, and he finally gets there, after all these years and, whatnot. So that's a culmination style story. And you can do that for baby faces and heels. You don't have to do that for just baby faces, but obviously when you culminate somebody in most terms or in most regards, you would think, oh yeah, you're culminating the baby face, you're culminating this big face of the company or whatever else it is. You can't just say, we have Hulk Hogan. Of course you have Hulk Hogan. That's great. But if you don't have anyone for Hulk Hogan to fight, anyone that's basically Hulk Hogan's Batman or Hulk Hogan's Riddler or whatever else it is, to his Batman, you've got to have the Joker. You've got to have those other characters. You've got to have those villains, those things that he's got to go up against, and he's got to fight, tooth and nail to get to where he wants to be, or get the thing that he wants to get out of, whatever scenario you're trying to, to craft. So the destination is certainly got to be factored in, and that's like where you're looking at, but you can't focus just on the destination. You've got to provide people on that ride, whatever story it is, whatever narrative you're telling, those twists and those turns and those moments and those reveals and those Easter eggs and those other little bits of that narrative that, hook people and keep people engaged, because that's how you retain people. When people are saying, oh, this was bad, he lost here, or whatever else, but we might get to see like what he's got to say, and he might come back more motivated than ever, next week. So give it a chance, to tune in next week, because he's not going to give up. We know Santana, we know this person or know that person, we know Kazarian. Even if he's a dastardly son of a bitch heel, he won't give up. That's one thing that we know about him. He's been at this for 20 long years. You think he's just going to disappear and walk away now when he just, he didn't win the title, on his like third or fourth attempt or whatever it was. I can't remember now. Maybe fifth attempt. I don't know. But again, yeah, he's not going to walk away. He's been battling to get this thing for 20 long years, man. He's not going to give that up for anything else that you might want to say about him. He's been sticking at it, and he's been saying that this is the end goal in many ways. This is the last little piece to the puzzle, so to speak. This is the one of the last hurrahs for him, sort of thing, I think. Or last little bucket list items or whatever it is, I think, as well. So, you can always go back to old angles very easily. What is this angle? Because it's much easier to see the angle for what it is when you can see the complete angle, when you can see the complete narrative of that story. But the thing is, with professional wrestling, when one chapter ends of somebody's story, you've got to start another chapter. So you've got to keep the narrative going. That's the difference between like wrestling and Hollywood or whatever. But like with like any soap opera or whatever, you've got to keep the story going. Even if, whatever, I don't know I don't watch many modern shows, but like Modern Family, that's one of the shows that everyone knows about, like it's a big show. Like same with like shows that are on the new network, like Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead and a bunch of other shows that they've got. I don't know the other shows, but those are the two big ones that everyone always talks about. It's not like season 1 isn't the end of the whole series. The first episode isn't the end of the whole season. You know what I mean? Like there's still more story to say and more place to go. You've got to think of it like each episode of like a series like that, whatever it is, and you've got to really think like long-term series, because wrestling is a really long-term series most of the time. It's going on for 20 years, a year at least, for the most part in most people's lives. So you're looking at saying, okay, cool, great. That narrative, that part of the story is over, but this wrestler and this other wrestler are still here. So it doesn't end here. It doesn't really end here. And then even if that rivalry is going to end up next month or in the next couple of months or in the next whatever year or whatever it is, they might run it back next year. Who knows? You never know with things like this. But you've got to have something else for them. And not just for them, you've got to have something else for everyone. You've got to have something else, like no matter who wins and who loses, each person has got to go off on another chapter. So building that narrative again. So you're not just saying, okay, we're going to plan out what Mike Santana is going to do for his path of purpose. You could say, okay, well, we're going to get to that culmination first, and then we're going to decide what he's going to do from there. Well, what we want to do from there is kind of pivot away and kind of put it on Kazarian and kind of have him chase the belt again. Okay, great. That's a great idea, actually. Most people aren't going to agree with that, I think, but it is actually a really good idea because people are invested in Mike Santana. They care about Mike Santana. They want to see him with the belt. So saying he hasn't got the belt and we're going to make you pay to see it again is a great, narrative to say, okay, let's try to reinvest people in Mike Santana. But we can't just sit here and say, let's reinvest in Mike Santana. We've got to say, okay, who is he going to fight for the next 6 months or whatever it is till he gets the belt back or whatever it is. Or even if he gets the belt back at Genesis, who knows, I don't know, which I don't think that they will do, but maybe they will, they might surprise me. But like, if he wins the belt there, then it's like, okay, well, maybe have a rematch with Kazarian, but after that, where are we going from there? You know what I mean? Who else is he going to face? Maybe he'll face some NXT guys, whatever. I don't really think anything of, him facing any of those guys, because most of those guys, like, unless you're going to build them and build them and build them for 6 months and build them really strong for 6 months, I don't think that, even then, you've got to make them world title level contenders. Like, that's a really difficult task to do in 6 months. Like, they could challenge for the title on B shows or whatever else it is. That's fine. That's different. But for somebody to challenge like them on the more A shows is a bit different. We saw how Trick Williams did work though, but he was actually like at that, like he was already a world champion in NXT, though he'd kind of been moved off to the side because they felt like, well, he isn't quite our guy. We really want it to be on Oba and whatnot, and then maybe we want it to be on Ricky and whatnot. So that was their direction. So then it's like, well, Trick's free or kind of free, and he's kind of a big deal. So we kind of want to build him up and make him even bigger, so that people feel like, oh man, he's this runs something big for him to really sink his teeth into for a good 6 months and whatnot, and really establish him or reestablish him at that top level. Not just, and we don't really have time over here to reestablish him at that top level. We can still do some stuff with him, but it would be easier if we had another 2-hour show or whatever it was, but we can't put him on Raw and we can't put him on SmackDown. So hey, TNA, here you go, type thing. But again, that worked well for TNA at that time, but I do think that you can't build up all these NXT guys. It's a bit different if you were building up, like you are kind of building up Stacks, and he might be your main guy, but you're not building up the other guys. And that's fine if you're going to say, well, Stacks is the only one that's going to get a proper big time title shot or whatever. That's a bit different, whatnot. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But with any narrative, again, you've got to be saying, okay, these guys even in Lost, like they lost there the other week in that steel cage, and they said, hey, they've banished the NXT guys or whatever it is. Have they really? I don't really feel like it's over. And I feel like if it is over, that the story was awfully, awfully quick to be over. Like, this should have still been going on for another 6 months or whatever. Another 3 months at least. Like Stax still has the international title, so it's definitely not over, and there's still unresolved issues, so it's definitely not over. So yeah, I don't know whether that was a smart narrative choice there to say this feels like TNA won and TNA has done this big thing, when you're going to continue the narrative. It feels like they should have probably lost and then said, okay, cool, we'll go from here and we'll figure something out, and we'll keep it rolling, and we'll get to the next thing, and yeah, we'll make it happen, and this will end at some point, but not now. It doesn't feel like they got the ultimate victory. And I think Ariana should have came down in the match and betrayed her father, for then NXT to win the match and then go from there. I think that should have been the choice there. Whether that's debatable or whatever, I don't know, but certainly that's my perspective of, well, this thing's going to keep going, so maybe you could say, oh yeah, well, TNA really needed the win. I don't really think that they did. I don't know, but yeah, that's what I mean. And you can point to any narrative you want, but yeah, I just happened to look at that one a little bit and say, well, wait a minute, like, this narrative is still continuing, the story is still continuing, this arc is still continuing. What does it do for TNA to beat NXT at this point when not everything has been wrapped up? Not a whole lot. So it does a lot, would have done a whole lot more for NXT to win and to be like, haha, we beat you and whatnot, even though they were a man down and even though they had interference and all of that shenanigans, whatever. But then you get that whole, like, whatever thing of saying, oh, well, they will get there. But the thing is, it's like, again, maybe they were like, and this is one thing where I'm like, with the Mike Santana situation as well, like I said, looking at that feud with him and Frankie, it's like, we really haven't been paying much attention to that. And we've been doing all this other stuff. And I said it before, pick your lane. You know what I mean? Pick your lane. Either Santana's in the title picture or whatever. I don't care if he's in the title picture. That's cool. That's great. I liked him to be in the title picture, but he's either in the title picture or he's not. You know what I mean? He's either doing this feud against NXT that wronged him and all this other stuff, or he's being, in the feud with, somebody else. So that's, again, like, you cannot really have two narratives going at the same time for one person. Same with Kazarian. He's got two narratives going at the same time. He's got this narrative with Mike Santana, and he's got this narrative with Bear Bronson, kind of. Yes, you can have other little narratives, like, I think, whatever, but, like, you've got to have them feel like, okay, that's cool and all, or whatever, but the real focus right now is this, or the real focus right now is that, So again, that's why I said, like, why have this thing on a random episode of TV and not on the pay-per-view? Again, you're dividing where you're going to have people or why you're going to have them in certain things or whatever. Maybe it was because of timing or whatever it was for the story that they wanted to tell or whatever it was, but I don't know. I still think it's like something that, you look at and you say, oh, well, does this work? And I don't know. But yeah, I was like, when you're saying it's a hotly contended area, well, now, like, what's Santana going to do next week? Or, well, not next week, but early next year? Is he going to be on commentary? Like, what's he going to do? And you don't want to have it feel like, or have it seem like, he's not doing anything or he's just waiting around or whatever too much, because, like, again, maybe you can still do stuff with it, because it is like, no matter what happens tomorrow night, live on AMC, not tomorrow night, but next week, I'm going to see you at Genesis, like that sort of thing. And again, same thing when it comes to the AMC debut, maybe. Or maybe you should save that to the AMC debut. Maybe you should just, like, tease it at that episode. I don't know. Because, again, I don't care what's happened tonight. I don't care, like, if somehow they do something crazy. Like I've said a few times with the whole Nick Nemeth situation, it's like, I don't think that having two people have the quarter shot was great, but in some ways it could be. If you, like, again, it's like, well, are you going to try to put him in a triple threat now just for him to lose? I don't know. He's been saying he's going to either call his shot every time, and then it's like something else happens or whatever. So he needs to either cash it in so that it's finally done with, so we don't have to keep repeating that same story beat of, well, he didn't get to cash it in because NXT or some bullshit or something else, because then you're starting to be like, wait a minute, this guy's meant to be heel, but yet he's being attacked at every twist and turn by these other heels. Like, are you turning in babyface? Like, if you are turning in babyface, okay, cool, great, whatever, but turning babyface. Like, properly turning babyface. And his partnership or whatever. You know, he's got, their nemesis now have to be babyface. Don't keep saying, oh, he's a heel, but he keeps getting attacked by these other outsider heels or whatever. You could say, oh, well, no one's safe. But that makes no sense, really. Like I say. So when you're looking at a narrative, you've got to be looking at it like, well, this has to serve a purpose. Is he turning face? What's going on? Why are we doing this way? You know, we're not just doing it. We're seeing a payoff for it. Otherwise, let's not do it, or let's, you know, tone it down, or let's stop doing it, or let's, maybe you can have some of that chaos be cause of it, but it has to be like the actions that take out Nick Nemeth have to be done by a babyface. Somebody he's already kind of going to feud with. So he has to blame that babyface for hitting him or for the issue, whatever it is. Rather than you're fighting this back and forth of kind of not knowing where he really fits in, whether he's babyface or heel or whatever. So, yeah. Those are many things that you always have to consider when you're like designing these things. You can't just be saying, okay, we have this story of Mike Santana, you know, who's overcome his addictions, he's overcome his demons, he's going to rise to the top. He's going to beat this person, he's going to feud with Mustafa Ali, you know, he's going to lose to Mustafa Ali, he's going to come back strong, he's going to beat Mustafa Ali, you know, all of this. He's going to win the world title after losing, or not really losing, but losing, and then he's going to win. You know, we're going to go from there. Now we're going to go with Kaz. He's going to win the title after 20 long years. He's going to take advantage of the situation, unlike last year where he said, hey, I want to do it in my hometown or whatever and all of this. I'm announcing in advance I want to cash in on you. But no, that didn't happen and whatever. So now you're going to say, okay, cool, great. He's going to have to be more crafty, you know, more opportunistic, whatever, to if he really wants to get that title, and he is like, I have to get that title. No, by no means, other means, by have to get it. You know, like, I cannot live without it anymore. That is it. I have got to get it. I've got to take the most opportune moment that I can, whatever it is, and do it. I don't care where it is or how it is or why it is. You know, this is my narrative now. I'm taking it. Because I learnt from my previous mistake of saying, hey, I'm going to wait a few months, and then, or teasing it or whatever else it is, and then saying, hey, I'm going to challenge you in my hometown, you know, or whatever. Instead of doing that, just do it. Say, right, you've been taken advantage of. Let me get in there and win this title. You know, and again, you need more of that, like, success going to his head type thing. You know, he's finally done it. He finally is really the king, you know, and you almost should have had like more narrative around like he really wasn't the king because he wasn't the champion and whatnot before, and now you finally are saying, well, now we've got to recognize him as the king because now he is the champion and whatnot, no matter what. So that's not just elevating Kazarian, that's elevating the belt. So when you're bringing it back to somebody else, now they're the man, they're the king, they're the guy, whatever. You're labeling more of it upward. And yes, you can say, oh, well, Frankie was the king, this person deposed the king, so to speak. He's the new king. You can have that, obviously. But still, if you're now begrudgingly having to call him the king and relate that to the title, the title makes the man makes the title type thing, argument or whatever. But it also builds the prestige, because if you're saying he is the king of TNA because he is the champion, the world champion, that is for somebody else to come along once that's coming to an end and say, yoink, I am the king now. And same for anyone else later on that comes down the road. You're giving them more of a rub, more of a distinction of like they have achieved something. Many men like Kazarian fought 20 long years. Alex Shelley fought 20 long years to get this thing. Chris Sabin fought like 15 odd years, whatever it was, to get this thing. Robert Roode fought 10, 12 long years, whatever it was, to get this thing. Eric Young fought 10, 15 years to get this thing. Like all these little things of saying all these people fought long and hard to get this thing. Finally, they got it after all the time and energy and everything that they put in. This is just another chapter in that. But again, when you're building those things up, you're building up another narrative for somebody when they come back to something like Santana, like Josh Alexander. There aren't many people in the modern era, and I would classify the modern era as like the last 10 years or so, whatever, or maybe even the last 5 years, as being like two-time champions. Obviously, there's people that have held the championship 2 times, but I would say there's not that many 2-time champions among the Anthem era or whatever, the new era of Anthem and whatnot, beyond Pop TV and beyond Destination America and whatnot, and beyond Twitch and whatnot. When it was on Access TV and whatnot, the Access TV era, or post 2016, 2017, whatever era, maybe post 2020 era. I don't know, because that's the decade that we're in. So yeah, there haven't been many 2-time champions. Moose, pretty much, and Eddie Edwards, I think. Like, EY did win his second championship in this era, but he won the other title 5-10 years prior to that. So yeah, there. For other people besides Josh and besides Santana, and maybe I can't think of anyone else really that's won the title twice. Yeah, that's a more elite company to be in. And then again, same thing for being a 3-time champion, 4-time champion, 5, etc. I think to be a 3 or 4 or 5-time champion, you have to be a very special person, especially in this era, or to be a very long running champion, nearly a year or over 300 days or whatever, things like this or whatnot. That, or you just have to have no goddamn competition, basically, of being there is no one for me to fight. So, yes, of course I'm going to hold this title for a million years, whatever it is, or for as long as possible, because there are basically no other main eventers for me to face. But that's also the problem of booking. Even if you say, well, there is no current main eventers now, it's well, that's where you've got to build these people. Find some, I saw this on many posts, and I think I've made some sorts of posts about these, but find a bunch of young guys, young, early 30s, 20s, whatnot. Invest in those young guys, and even if they're going to leave, doesn't matter. If you get 4 or 5 years with them, you've got to push them hard. That's why I've been saying like Trey and the Rascals and these other guys. Even if you're only going to push them as a tag team or whatever else, as one thing or another, they're still a great attraction that you can still say, well, they're a great attraction in the area that we need them to be. Somebody else will be like Josh Alexander or whoever will be another attraction in this division. And, Leon Slater will be the X Division guy. And then we'll have something else. And we'll also have the Knockouts. So we also have that going for us and whatnot. So we're always going to have something else. And not, like I say, not everyone should shine at every given moment, or shine as brightly, perhaps, should be the way to put it. Like, not everyone can have a 5-star match every single night. What is considered 5-star matches by Dave Meltzer and co. and whatnot. We should be saying, why did people care? Why did they tune in? Not just because they thought they were going to see a 5-star, match, but because they were invested. There was this great narrative that people were like, oh man, I can't believe that, Santana got gypped. I want to see him win that belt back. Here's his opportunity. Is he going to win it back? Let's see, and here's this new era that we're coming into. So that's really exciting. There's a lot of stuff going on. We need to build that new wave of talent, replenish the roster, replace some of the guys that are, in that older demographic, because again, no matter what, they cannot, rely on them forever. Whether they're going to WWE or retiring or whatever it is, short term, sure. Long term, no. To help establish other people and whatnot, yes. But they should be your secondary focus. Your primary focus should be saying, yes, these guys are great and they were great and they're still here and they're still doing great things or whatever it is, or still holding on. But here comes this other team or whatever, or this other individual. How are they going to overtake them? Finally, they do overtake them and it's their time. So, yeah. That is something that I really want them to focus in on in the new year. But anyway, let's pick another story. The narrative that you're kind of building between the Hardys and the Righteous. Now, there's another narrative that I want to kind of touch upon as well with this, especially with the tag team scene, I guess. But what's the narrative here is really cool, I think, actually. Like, you've just started this, obviously, so I'm hoping for a lot more, and I'm expecting a lot more from this, obviously. But you're almost like, I don't know, I don't know whether the Righteous are gonna con the Hardys into, or try to con the Hardys into feeling like their immortality is like the goal, rather, and like almost forget about the titles kind of thing, almost. I don't know. It's a really weird thing that you're trying to achieve with them, and I think that's great. That's interesting. Let's find out where this goes. But I think another narrative that I kind of want to see is between Wes and Dez, and I don't know whether I said this, but like, to me, it feels like there is an unfinished story there between them. And it feels like I could say this about them, that they could win it from the Hardys. I don't know whether that's like the best idea, but it could be a great idea in some ways, because you're sort of passing the torch to them. They are the new Hardys, so to speak. Or what you might want to do is be like, okay, cool, the Righteous now have these titles after beating the Hardys at some point. I don't know when, at some point. Like, but whatever. They've held them for a little while, and now it's Slammiversary, let's say, or Bound for Glory, let's say, and or it's coming up to that time. And the Hardys are like, again, as last year, perhaps. Like that's, I think it was both Slammiversaries. They said, "Hey, this might be our last roll of the dice," type thing. So do that again. Do that again and say, "Okay, this could be our last roll of the dice," but don't have it be against, or don't have it be to go against the Righteous. Have it to go against Wentz and Dez. But also find a way for them to say, well, this is just important for us. If we don't get this victory, that's it for us too. We're never going to challenge for the titles again, or whatever, something. Or whatever it is. Put some other stakes on them to say, well, they will, like, disband or whatever. Something. I don't know. But yeah, put the same level of stakes on both teams, then have the Rascals win that match, the qualifying match, and then you've basically been building them throughout, like who is there that is a bigger team than the Rascals in terms of being over. They're the next Hardys. They're the next guys that you can build around and say, okay, cool, they're going to lead us into the future. We're going to have some other tag teams that are here that are going to complement them and that are going to feud with and whatnot. The titles aren't just going to be on them the whole time or whatever, but they're up there, and we want them to be, on that pedestal, felt like they're our guys, whatever. They've, mostly stuck through us through thick and thin and whatnot, and we've given them opportunities and whatnot. And here, again, we're celebrating them and saying, hey, they effectively retired the Hardys, and now here they are, or whatever, to become the new tag team champions of the world, and go on a significant run after that. So that's something. I don't know how exactly you can do it, but that's something I would want to see, because I think you've already, I don't know whether you're actually putting the belts on the Righteous. I'm just assuming that you kind of are, maybe. I don't know. You could also put it on some other people or whatever. I don't know whether you're going to put it on the Andersons or whatever. I think they're officially signed along with Brer Bronson, or at least on a negotiated contract, much like Nick Nemeth or Matt Cardona, and saying, hey, you can work with us, you can work with WWE, and you can work with AEW if you really want, but if you're gonna work for us, and you're gonna, we want, if we want you in creative, or if you want to be involved, you've got to be turning up, you've got to be here. You can't be like, oh shit, sorry, I've been filming for AEW, or I've been doing stuff for WWE, or whatever it is. If we need you, then, and you no-show, then we're pretty much saying, well, this relationship cannot continue, and all the best to you, but we're if you're going to be here, be here. If you're going to be there, please let us know, because otherwise, we won't factor you into stories or into things or whatever if you're not going to be here and whatever. But if you're going to be here and you're going to do what you're going to do here, then that's what we expect you to do. You're going to do, this for us. This is what we want from you, whatever. So that's our position right now. This is again, what we're building towards. If you're gonna have matches between any two individuals or any teams or whatever. You've got to vary those matches. You can't just have generic match, singles match or traditional tag team match. You've got to vary it. You've got to have a ladder match. Then you've got to have a weapons match, last person standing match, hardcore match, whatever. Submission match, maybe best 2 out of 3 falls, ladder match, whatever else it is. All these different things, because people won't be intrigued or interested to see them. If they're a singles act, well, now they've got to perform in a tag team setting as well. Like, vary it up, have as many different things as you can. If they're mostly a tag team person, well, now they're going to have a singles match with one of the other participants in that tag team feud or whatever it is, to build to the tag team match, rather than it being, because that's the only thing you can kind of do with tag team people. Instead of like, they both lost, well, one of them lost, kind of, and that's building the heat, like that. Or saying, well, they lost but they didn't lose the titles or something. They lost in a different scenario, just on TV or whatever it was, or just in a non-title match of some sort. Like, they were in, I don't know, they're in that recent match on TV there. That was the steel cage match that they lost. And then you say, oh, okay, well, they, but they, in this one they didn't. But like, they say they lost it. In that regard, you've got to win over them. So you've got something to work with. You can't just have, straight singles matches. Even with the best wrestlers in the world, like, unless like they're really like fairly farly spread apart, like, people won't just be interested in just seeing another straight up match between these two. You've got to elevate the stakes. You've got to change the formula if they're going to face again, because people have seen this. So it's like, okay, right, well, now we need to do something else, or whatever, or this person needs to do something else. Same thing, like, you can evolve the characters or whatever or whatnot. So somebody loses, then they go on a journey to come back or whatever, or they change their gimmick and come back or whatever. Somebody gets injured, they go away for a bit, they come back, and here we go again, type thing. Guys, yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say on this one. I hope that you have enjoyed, though, and I hope you'll join me again in another one.